Hello, this is Dr. B. I appreciate you stopping by. Stand by. Let's get to it.
Chapter 7. Pulling My Hair Out. Teenagers. There's nothing wrong with teenagers that reasoning with them won't aggravate. Author unknown. Two workers were sweeping out an old warehouse. Suddenly, one of the men stood a ladder against a wall, climbed it, and began shouting, "I'm a light bulb!" The boss walked in and saw the worker on the top of the ladder proclaiming his brightness. His supervisor told him to get down and get back to work. After about 20 minutes, the same guy was at it again. He was back up the ladder shouting, "I'm a light bulb!" This time, the boss warned him that if he did it again, he would be fired. The man went back to work, but 20 minutes later, he was back up the ladder shouting, "I'm a light bulb!" The supervisor shouted back, "You're fired! Get out of here!" The man climbed down the ladder and started to walk out. Another man was walking out right behind him. The manager stopped the second man and asked, "Where do you think you're going?" The man replied, "Home. Can't expect me to work in the dark." Adolescence is a time of irrationality for teenagers and confusion for moms and dads. Teen years are described as difficult ones by writers and parents alike. Sometimes we can even get teenagers to admit the difficulty. Parents face increased rebellion and don't always know where their child is or what they are doing. Our children are forced to face the reality of having to be more responsible. They try to manage their feelings of self-doubt while maintaining the facade of having it all together. Stressful is the word that most parents and their teenagers could use to describe the experience. Adolescence is a period of volatile transition. It is that stage for the teenager between childhood and adulthood. A teen sees themselves as an adult and becoming equal to their parents. Parents have difficulty seeing that their adolescent is no longer a child. They often find it difficult to accept that their child is no longer completely under their influence. The average teenager wants more independence and freedom. The average parent sees them as unprepared for life's risks and responsibilities. The teenager questions, pushes, and challenges the boundaries. They test what they can and cannot do, and in the process push their parents. In fact, adolescence can most appropriately be described as a time of pushing. The push. Teens are pushing away from their parents and pushing towards adulthood. They push back when they see attempts to control them and push for their own sense of power. Adolescence is also a time of pushing away from the past and pushing into the future. Parents feel this pushing and shoving. Some parents buckle under the pressure and give in to the demands of their teenagers. However, adolescents are frequently unprepared for the freedoms they seek. Giving in allows a teenager to make too many mistakes. Teenagers will face big decisions about their values, including sex, alcohol, and drugs. Some bad choices can haunt them for the rest of their lives. Legal problems and unwanted pregnancies are frequent examples. Some parents provide too little guidance. Other parents become rigid and squeeze their fists around their adolescent. Too often this results in resentment and more rebellion. It can also encourage sneakiness. Later, resentment and going behind a parent's back can develop into open warfare. The adolescent years are unavoidable. If parents had a choice, most would choose to jump their child over the teen years, skipping them altogether. However, these years are necessary for changing children into adults. Unfortunately, struggles are necessary to mature, regardless of the strain. Guided properly, teenagers will be prepared for life on their own. However, being unprepared opens the way for mistakes that can continue to cause a child problems throughout their life. Lessons can go unlearned. These lessons and their accompanying pain are usually repeated until a person finally learns them. Therefore, parents are faced with a monumental task. We must find a way to direct and not smother, protect and not mother. There is a need for balance. Balance. The trick to raising teenagers is to find a sense of balance. The less they learned as children, the more difficult it is to reach this balance when they are teens. The first step towards balance is to recognize that the adolescent's desire for more independence and freedom is normal. However, if they are given as much freedom as they want, the excessive power will result in disaster. A parent needs to find balance between allowing freedom and independence while still keeping their child within reasonably safe boundaries. Teenagers need to learn how to deal with having more and more freedom and choices as they grow older. Allowing them to make more of their own choices helps prepare them for their future. However, this independence should only be given when it is reasonable to do so, and the cost of failure would not be overwhelming. Many times, people need to learn from their mistakes rather than simply be told not to make them. Teenagers are no different. Unfortunately, during those times of setting limits and trying to reach this safe balance, a parent should expect their teenager to make accusations. Parents will be accused of not understanding, being mean, or not caring. Of course, reality could not be further from the truth. Parents set boundaries because they care, and because they understand that there are dangers out there. It takes a lot more energy and sensitivity to find balance than it does to be a passive or domineering parent. A parent who doesn't frustrate their child from time to time isn't doing their job. No frustration means that a teenager is getting their own way too frequently. However, the need to limit their freedom is unlikely to be recognized by a teenager until they become adults themselves. Sometimes they don't realize the love and caring that went into balancing freedom and safety until they have children of their own. This tension between parents and adolescents continues for some time. The pressure creates a strain on the parent-teenager relationship. The strain. The teen years can put an unreasonable strain on the parent-child relationship. Too often when a parent is pushed, they instinctively push back. Their back stiffens and they move to enforce their authority. Self-restraint and thoughtfulness are called for before taking action. Parents need to remind themselves who they are dealing with. One way to picture a teenager is to imagine a child inside an adult's body. There are a number of things that they can do physically, and many of these they can handle adequately. The usual organized activities and sports would fall into this category. We are speaking of youth in an adult frame. This body can also have sex, commit crime, drink alcohol, become violent, and do drugs. These poor choices can occur because the child within that body hasn't completely grown up. The child part of the adolescent still needs guidance and boundaries. The immaturity of a child makes them unable intellectually or emotionally to deal adequately with some of the decisions that they will face as a teenager. They are often full of emotion and empty of adequate experience and wisdom to make good choices. During this time of growing up, teens frequently resent direction, suggestion, or control by their parents. However, they still require it. The fact that a parent is attempting to protect their child can be seen as irrelevant to the teenager or missed altogether. Adolescents appear unable to see or admit to their immaturity. There are rarely exceptions. Parents are repeatedly seen as stupid, controlling, and unfair. Teens feel that they know what they are doing and usually talk themselves into believing that they can handle life's challenges on their own. However, there is a contradiction stirring within them. At the same time they are sending out this message of self-confidence and self-sufficiency to parents, they are awash in insecurity and self-doubt. They compare themselves to peers, feel alone, and worry about embarrassment or failure. Adolescents often feel overwhelmed and confused by the mixture of thoughts and feelings they experience. Their minds are revved and going at 90 miles an hour. Unfortunately, teenagers usually cover over these fears and apprehensions with their drive for independence and freedom. Independence and freedom come higher on their priority list than admitting anxiety exists. An adolescent hesitates to acknowledge their depth of apprehension because this admission could be perceived as weakness by parents and interfere with a teenager's desire for independence. So, how can we reduce the strain for adolescents and the tension between parents and teens? Reducing the strain. There is a way to reduce the strain of these in-between years. So much of our effectiveness for parenting teenagers has its foundation in earlier childhood. The healthy lessons that have been taught and what they have learned can greatly aid both them and us as we help them through adolescence. The child who has been taught to respect their parents, take personal responsibility, and deal with mistakes is a child who is more likely to be reached as a teenager. When matters of healthy choices and morality emerge during adolescence, these adolescents are more likely to listen to and be guided by their parents. A child who has felt loved, appreciated, and special will be more comfortable and confident during the turbulent teen years. Mutual respect makes them more open to their parents' direction. A good relationship already established allows a parent to set rules which will result in less rebellion, because when a teen receives direction from a parent, they don't just respond to the guidance, but how they feel about the parent. The healthier our relationships are with our children before they become teenagers, the easier it will be to maintain these relationships and discipline them when they are older. Adolescents will still be somewhat rebellious, but less so. They will be better able to accept discipline. Respect for their parents will be more evident. Being serious as parents and wise in how to parent involves knowing what to expect from teenagers. Having a heads up on what to expect will help to avoid believing that when things go wrong, it's always because we are bad parents or we have bad children. Frustrating and confusing situations arise even with healthy parents and good kids. Knowing what to expect takes away some of the surprise when problems come. This forewarning allows parents to be prepared and keep a level head. Parents need to see clearly what is normal thought and behavior for the teenager. What to expect. What brings about this period of change, this thing called adolescence? The teen years are a time combining old news with the beginning of new experiences. Your child has spent the last 12 years observing and learning. The world has been their university. They have soaked in lessons from teachers, their family, and life. They have been with other children, influenced and been influenced. They have begun to question how they should think and feel. The period of childhood, if it were a library, would be full of books from top to bottom. Some volumes have been read and some reread. Some lessons have been taught over and over again without understanding the ending. Sometimes what is taught in these books is unfinished or contains bad information. There is book after book with page after page. They fill the mind and direct behavior. These books represent all of the experiences and influences of childhood. But the library isn't finished. All of what has been contained in the first 12 years of life will now be placed alongside the experiences of adolescence that will follow. The onset of puberty trumpets the beginning of extreme change. Some parents feel like it is the beginning of the end. Puberty. Puberty is that metamorphosis which changes the caterpillar into the butterfly. It is the physical and psychological transition from childhood to adulthood. Unfortunately, this period of chrysalis, while things are melting, molding, and changing, is not a pretty one. Change for the budding adolescent involves the mind, the body, and emotions. All of who they are is affected. How they think, what they feel, and what they do is included. Like a butterfly's changing from a weak and vulnerable caterpillar to a beautiful creation ready to take flight is the teenager. However, unlike the butterfly, this period of change comes with a sting. Not all is pleasant with puberty or during the period of adolescence. Puberty brings about a rush of hormones. Glands secrete their secret potions, and the mind and body begin to change. Emotions start to fluctuate along with them. The body begins to experience strange sensations. Many of these begin to occur when in the presence of the opposite sex. Unfamiliar thoughts spring into the mind. Arousal of the body comes unpredictably and inconvenient at times. Along with these new experiences comes the confusion of emotion. These sensations can feel overwhelming. A teenager is unable to put such sensations in perspective and label them as normal hormonal changes. Instead, they tend to personalize these experiences, get confused, and wonder if something is wrong with them. They don't automatically assume that others their age are having the same thoughts and feelings. Their perceptions can turn on them and leave them feeling ashamed or embarrassed. Physical changes can surprise and concern an unprepared child. They begin to grow hair where there was previously none. They can feel funny about this new growth, or embarrassed that they have no change when their friends do. Avoiding being seen unclothed by not participating in gym or not showering in front of others is common. Shapes and sizes begin to change. There is growth where previously there was none. Bumps and bulges begin to take shape. They are not who they used to be. As for the mind, it is trying to make sense of all the changes taking place, often being overwhelmed because of so many happening at the same time. Teenagers deal with their voices changing, menstruation, hair growth, nocturnal emissions, confusing feelings, and strange impulses. Few experiences are as frightening for a girl as having her first period and not being sure what is happening. Or a boy experiencing nocturnal emissions and wondering what's wrong with him. Teenagers are not quite ready to deal with the process of metamorphosis, but they are thrust into puberty nonetheless. The onset of puberty, which signals the beginning of adolescence, is a stressful time for both parents and their children. Caring parents struggle with how to support their teenagers while not becoming overly frustrated themselves. Emotional swings and excessive emotionality are commonplace. However, this is just the beginning. Knowing what to expect from the adolescent's changing mind, body, and emotions helps prepare a parent for the job ahead. Normal teens. A number of important considerations for parents have been consistently observed in teenagers. These considerations give us guidance as to what to expect. They are true the majority of the time, but should not be taken as always the case. These observations will not apply to every teenager in every situation. This is due to differing circumstances, learning, and personality. However, these guidelines will be helpful in knowing what to expect from most teenagers most of the time. One area of change parents frequently notice with their adolescents is mood, or perhaps it would be more accurate to say, moods. Moods. The question regarding an adolescent's emotions is not always what to expect, but what not to expect. Almost anything can happen. Most teenagers, especially girls, can be described at times as moody. Emotions can change dramatically. Often this change occurs with little or no warning. Along with these shifts can come irritability or edginess that the adolescent will frequently deny. They don't seem to see their own agitation. However, parents will come to easily recognize these shifts. This irritability will often be seen in a short temper and explosions over the smallest things. Emotional overreactions can be commonplace. Misperceptions on the part of the teenager as well as misunderstandings become much more frequent than when they were children. Teens not only become upset over what was said or done to them, but what they think was said or done. Negative reactions to inoffensive situations are not uncommon. Defensiveness seems to operate on a hair trigger. It is cocked and ready to be fired. Matters that, on an emotional scale of 1 to 10, should provoke a 2, emotionally can provoke a 7, 8, or 9. This emotional exaggeration and instability is usually a result of hormonal changes and the physically changing mind of the adolescent. These factors combine with the stress of the demands in middle school and high school. Emotions rooted in confusion and self-doubt can become inflamed. Misunderstanding feeds these fires. In addition to this moodiness, parents often feel emotionally distant from their teenager. It seems as if the teenager is creating the gap. This feeling of distance is often part of that need to be separate from parents, as well as an adolescent's search for freedom. These factors often add up to a tremendous amount of frustration that parents experience with their teenagers. The frustration is based on experiencing the adolescents as irrational. They become difficult to reach. Reasoning and logic don't seem to work. Often explanations can be given until a parent literally turns blue in the face, and yet the teenager doesn't seem to get it. However, the effects of mood don't end here. The moods of the teenager work to drive their behavior. Behavior. Adolescents are well known for running. Not necessarily running away from home, but what feels like running away from their families. This running away can be done on the inside as well as the outside. They can retreat within themselves and fail to share vital bits of their lives with parents. Teens can withdraw in the house by isolating themselves in their rooms. They can run by going outside and preoccupying themselves with friends or extracurricular activities. Once adolescents become more mobile by having use of automobiles, they will stay away from home even more, getting involved in activities with friends in school. Frequent periods of being away from home or being absent for long periods of time are uncomfortable for parents, mothers in particular. Moms are vulnerable to taking their children's absences personally and often feel rejected by their teenagers. They have difficulty accepting that their adolescent doesn't want to be with them or is embarrassed by their presence. Sometimes this need to be away is attached to the teen seeing their family as an enemy and then not wanting to be with them. However, most of the time, being gone is just a normal part of adolescence. Mothers find the situation easier when they accept this fact. Absence is a normal step of separation from parents during that transition from childhood to adulthood. However, running away isn't the only common adolescent behavior seen by parents. Another frequently observed behavior of teenagers is their discomfort with being shown affection. They can avoid or even draw back when parents attempt to touch them. This discomfort with physical affection can be confusing and painful for parents. A teenager drawing back can hurt. This is particularly true when the avoidance is taken personally. A parent can be left feeling rejected. However, some teenagers who shun the physical affection of their parents in the presence of their peers will still want those hugs and words of comfort in the privacy of their own homes. The desire to appear cool is so strong that it overshadows the basic desire for love that is still present in adolescence. The difference in accepting private as opposed to public affection can be confusing for some parents. However, parents should accept this as normal and respect their child's desire for a little distance when out in public. So don't take things too personally. This principle should also be applied to how teenagers think. Thoughts. Teenagers tend to see themselves as grown up. It is wise for parents to recognize that this is the adolescent's perspective. Since they tend to think of themselves as adults, they often believe that they can handle life on their own. Teens want to receive the same measure of respect that an adult would be given. This expectation is not a point that is easy to argue a teenager out of. Adolescents believe they deserve respect, and as they say, that is that. The good news is that a parent can deliver respect without them relinquishing their authority. Parents can give direction, as well as discipline, in a respectful fashion. The adolescent years also bring a change of thinking in other areas. Teens will frequently become preoccupied with matters outside of the family. This focus can feel to a family as if their adolescent is being pulled away from them. Preoccupations include boyfriends or girlfriends, sports, band, hobbies, and other athletic or organized activities. Dangerous preoccupations include drugs, alcohol, sex, and anything else that takes them away from their responsibilities. Distraction for a teenager can be whatever the thing is that turns them on. As mentioned when discussing mood, adolescents often believe that they are being treated unjustly. Their perceptions of being treated unfairly and disrespected are common. Parents should expect such a reaction when stepping in to stop destructive distractions. However, feeling this way can also occur when there has been no real offense. These adolescent perceptions attach themselves to the emotions of teenagers and create behavior. These three factors of mood, thought, and behavior come together in the form of attitudes. Attitudes. One of the chief concerns parents have about teenagers is their attitude. If they could only get rid of that attitude, is a commonly heard complaint. Attitude is that air about them and that tone in their voice. Sometimes they appear arrogant, at other times ready for a fight. Many adolescents tend to be defensive due to being hypersensitive to criticism or being disrespected. They can feel injured even when there has been no attack. Teenagers can experience even mild and constructive criticism as a great offense. Teens tend to resent correction, suggestion, and direction. Keeping in mind that teenagers frequently think that they can manage life on their own, interventions by a parent to help can be seen as undermining an adolescent's privacy or independence. Teenagers also appear to be secretive by not wanting to share what's going on in their lives with family. There are times when a child's secrecy is a legitimate concern for parents because silence can be covering sexual involvement, bad grades, crimes, or alcohol and drug use. However, often it is simply part of that normal separation from parents in the attempt to be more of an individual and find their independence. Part of the edgy, dissatisfied attitude that parents often complain about is rooted in self-doubt, feeling overwhelmed, confusion, discouragement, and apprehension. Adolescents project a facade of competence because they believe they are supposed to be able to handle things, but they don't always feel secure and able. Consequently, they tend to deny the need for safety and boundaries, even when parents offer it. Their most common responses are, "I'm fine, leave me alone, nothing's wrong, I can handle it," or, "Can't you stay out of my business?" Dealing with teenage attitudes can be very frustrating, but attitudes serve a purpose. They help tell us what teenagers want. Wants. The first want that teens hold to is in itself a contradiction. The want generally applies to being with their friends. They want to be included and feel part of the group. An adolescent wants to be just one of the gang. On the other hand, they want to be seen as unique and feel they are special. They want to get attention because of their specialness. This is a difficult balancing act for them to maintain. Teenagers can sacrifice their uniqueness to go along with the crowd or exaggerate their specialness and be punished for not conforming. There is another want that is high on the adolescent's priority list. They also want privacy. Teenagers are becoming more aware of their bodies and uncomfortable with some of the changes that are taking place. They usually experience a growing sense of modesty. Adolescents become more concerned or even preoccupied with their appearance and their attractiveness to the opposite sex. Most teens shift from preteen avoidance of bathing to parents being unable to get them out of the bathroom. They want to be clean and attractive. This need for privacy includes a desire for respect and to be treated more as an adult. The logic is that because they feel grown up and adults get privacy, they should have it too. While keeping private what they desire to, teenagers want other thoughts and feelings to be heard. Respect includes being listened to and taken seriously. The average teenager will express their feelings one way or another, but not always the way parents would like. An adolescent who doesn't feel respected will often turn to negative behavior that will grab their parents' attention. Revenge and punishment can be their goal. Unfortunately, due to the oversensitivity of teenagers already mentioned, they easily feel disrespected. Therefore, there will be times when a parent is doing an excellent job and will still provoke a barrage of emotional responses from their child. Another want of teenagers includes the desire for freedom. Adolescents want the freedom to choose and the power that goes with it. Unfortunately, trying to avoid the accompanying responsibility is often part of this package. Freedom without responsibility comes at the expense of not learning valuable lessons. One must always coincide with the other. Finally, teens typically want to avoid being seen by peers as dependent on or too close to their parents. Too often, their friends view parents as the enemy. The typical teen will lay aside their affection for family, at least temporarily, to have the approval of their peers. Adolescent joins with adolescent in this attitude. To be seen enjoying a parent's company or accepting emotional support and affection can put a teenager at risk of rejection by their friends. Many peer groups do not accept family closeness as appropriate. Family ties are seen as bondage and considered to be a friend's weakness. The choice to separate from parents in this fashion is normal, but also leaves teenagers vulnerable. They still need love and support as they begin to face their fears. Fears. The time of adolescence is a turbulent one and includes many fears. Early on, there is the fear of not fitting in and not being included by others their age. The fear gradually expands to anxiety over how attractive they are to others. This period is also marked by a fear of not being unique and not being special. It is frequently difficult to balance these two desires. There is an ongoing fear of embarrassment, of doing something or saying something that will cause rejection or being shunned. As the need for peer acceptance grows, so does that desire to be seen as attractive. Teenagers ask themselves, am I pretty? Do I look good? Am I looking better? Do I look as good as my friends? Being found attractive is part of feeling accepted. Some children notice this fact long before adolescence. So there is a need to be appealing to others and the fear of not being attractive to the opposite sex. However, this need for attractiveness also includes being seen as appealing to the members of their own sex. Someone who is attractive to the opposite sex is seen as having power and therefore is also attractive to their own gender. Fear continues with the anxiety over the possibility of seen as dependent on parents. Dependence isn't considered attractive. As mentioned earlier, this often results in refusing hugs and kisses or feeling the need to push parents away. At times, adolescents will be openly defiant in front of friends to show their independence of parents. They will show out, act up, act out, or otherwise be a pain in the backside for their parents. Sometimes, having an audience provokes such a performance. Finally, teenagers face the fear of the future. Older adolescents have to face the reality of not only having more freedom and independence, but also having to take responsibility for their own lives. Their thoughts include such things as, what will life be like after high school? Can I handle it? All the testing of boundaries and posturing about independence in the protected teenage years gets slapped in the face with the reality that they will soon be out on their own. Leaving home involves leaving security, comfort, and predictability behind, at least for most kids. The desire for independence and freedom does not wipe out their attachment to their home and family, no matter how hard they try to cover it up. Unfortunately, most children do not have a clue as to what it is like to live out on their own. Very few teenagers understand what they will face in life and what living free will demand of them. They haven't yet had to face adult financial responsibilities and be answerable to the powers that be. Sometimes their fears are realized, especially if they have not been prepared in their earlier years to deal with life. Being prepared to tackle life independently involves gradually having more freedom and being required to accept responsibility long before they leave the nest. Otherwise, a teenager's grandiose announcement that they are grown up has a hollow ring. Teenagers try to cover up their fears and exaggerate their ability to handle freedom. But that's not all they exaggerate. Exaggeration. Expect teenagers to exaggerate. Just as emotions are exaggerated, so are their descriptions of risks taken, misdemeanors, and conquests, especially to their friends. This is a form of embellishment where they add to the truth to make it sound greater and grander to their audience. Talking big makes them more appealing to themselves and to their peers. One of the most common and distressing experiences for parents is overhearing phone conversations or coming across letters belonging to their teenagers. Often these conversations will involve descriptions of activities with boyfriends or girlfriends, criminal behavior, or involvement with drugs and alcohol. The language that is used and descriptions of teen behaviors can catch a parent off guard. These discoveries can be shocking to an unsuspecting parent. Parents are often stunned by the use of foul language, descriptive references to sexual activities, and things said about parents. There are times when these revelations represent major problems in a child and a family's life. However, these exaggerations, while common, may be based on almost nothing. In order for a child to build themselves up to their peers and be more cool, they will describe themselves as more rebellious, dangerous, and independent than they really are. They may boast of things that they have done or will do that aren't based on fact. When coming across such phone calls, notes, or letters, it is difficult for a parent not to assume the worst. However, parents should investigate the matter further, rather than assuming that they have a major problem on their hands. Gather more information before taking dramatic action. Speak to your teenager. Talk to other parents. Look for further evidence that something serious is going on and needs to be remedied. Sometimes what parents uncover has sexual aspects. So let's take a look at love, teenager style. Love. Adolescents take love very seriously, but they don't have years and years of experience with love and relationships. Teenagers see love here and now as intense. Teens often hold to the illusion that it will last. They don't have the perspective of parents who went through a number of teenage relationships themselves, only to learn later what a truly significant relationship involves. Adults should not overlook this teen perception. The tendency for parents to see teenage affections as puppy love and not to be taken seriously can be dangerous. This perception comes from the bias created by the experiences of an adult who knows these teen relationships are destined for failure and will only last a short while. However, adolescents don't have the same point of view. Emotional attachments with the opposite sex are new and passionate. They don't think ahead 5 or 10 years to see that they won't be around most of their first loves or most of their high school friends after graduation. Teenagers are tuned into the emotion of the moment. They resent and rebel against adults minimizing the seriousness of their relationships. The typical adolescent does not feel understood or respected by parents when it comes to boyfriends and girlfriends. Relationships for them tend to feel very intense and can become obsessive. These relationships are often emotional and unstable. The fear of rejection is already operating for the average teenager, and even more so in relationships with the opposite sex. The wise parent keeps in mind their teenager's view of dating and relationships. A teenager's intense feelings can prompt irrational behavior. Parents can comfort themselves with the knowledge that these relationships usually don't last, and their children will survive them. However, parents should be careful not to ignore how seriously their teenager takes their relationships. Depression and anxiety can ride hard on a teen when their love life isn't going well. Emotions are very real for a teenager, just as they are for an adult. The hurt of rejection is particularly stinging. Listen to and support teenagers during this time of learning. They often don't realize that their pain will be short-lived. Suicide can be a threat. Dating during adolescence is practice. It is in preparation for more serious relationships in the future. The more they learn now, the less pain they will experience in the future. Healthy learning and making good choices helps them not only with love, but with sex. Sex. Adolescents face an atmosphere of sensuality never before faced in our society. They are pummeled with sexually related advertisements, entertainment, song lyrics, and movies. Pornography is available through the mail, the TV, or the internet. The societal tone is not only the acceptance of sexual experimentation, but pressure to investigate it personally. Not only is normal heterosexual activity encouraged, but also experimentation with bisexuality and homosexuality. This pressure is easily confirmed by talking to female adolescents. Many are talking about and trying alternatives to normal sexuality regularly. Teenagers don't wake up one day and decide that they are going to be sexual. There are powerful motivators that are in play which prompt activity and exploration. Hormones are flowing throughout the adolescent body. Interest in sex is prompted along with unfamiliar and confusing feelings. These are new experiences. Thoughts and feelings occur that they have not had before. Curiosity grows in combination with hormone levels and the messages of society and their peers. Since teenagers see themselves as grown up and have that exaggerated streak of rebellion, they are often prompted to act out their curiosity in a sexual direction. Peer pressure adds more likelihood to sexual experimentation. To be thought of as in or cool often includes being sexually active. The sexual activity can also be seen as an act of independence, which is another natural desire of the teenager. Continued sexual involvement can be prompted by not only these factors, but also by stress and wanting support from another person. Too often, this includes the illusion of being loved. Emotional attachments, especially for girls, can prompt continued sexual activity. One trap that many young women fall into is that their first sexual acts create emotional bonding with that partner. Often, it's easy for the male to relinquish this bond and move on to another girl. However, this is often not so for the female. The emotional ties can remain. Adolescents have blind spots when it comes to their sexuality. These blind spots include denial. They will deny that sex is occurring, or that it is a problem, or that anything is wrong with experimenting. This denial includes an illusion of invulnerability. Bad things happen to other people, but won't happen to them. They will deny that their choices will result in pain. Their perception is that they are strong, know what they are doing, and love now will last forever. Another blind spot is ignorance. Most teenagers do not have any idea of the possible long-term consequences associated with sex. They are living in the moment and caught up in the emotionality of their relationships. Possible diseases and pregnancy are furthest from their minds. Teenagers suffer from relationship misperception. First of all, they overestimate the seriousness of their relationships. They have precious little to base their judgment on because their experience is limited. These are the first serious relationships that they have had. It is difficult for a teenager to understand that current relationships do not compare with the depth of intimacy they will experience with relationships in the future. Strong emotion adds to misperception. Emotion can be intense, and the adolescent assumes this means that a relationship is serious. Another misperception that most adolescents hold to is the belief that they are able to manage their sexuality and relationships. This occurs in spite of the emotional pain they experience, or even the loss of several serious relationships. Given all of these factors, parents need to keep in mind some precautions. These are ways in which they can help their teenager through the tempestuous sexual aspects of adolescence. First of all, parents need to discuss sex and its dangers with their teenagers. The possibilities of pregnancies, sexually transmitted diseases, emotional attachments, and the ways that these decisions now can impact the future all need to be reviewed. Since a lot of sexual behavior occurs spontaneously, how to avoid opportunities to be sexual needs to be reviewed. Situations where they would be alone with a member of the opposite sex, especially in a dark or isolated place, need to be avoided. Going to activities like parties needs to be evaluated carefully. Remember, a teenager placed in a position where there is an opportunity to be sexual doesn't have to plan it ahead of time. A sudden urge can come into play, and before they know it, hormones are in control and they are engaged in sex. It takes very little time to actually complete a sexual act. When parents determine that their children are sexually active, they need to take steps to discourage this behavior because of the dangers. However, the bad news is that if teenagers are determined to have sex, they will find a way of doing it. There is no way that parents can monitor their children 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. While parents should not condone sexual activity by their children, there are times when they need to be practical. If a teenager is sexually active and there is a very real danger of pregnancy, discretion dictates the use of birth control. This is a concession, not a matter of condoning. The safest approach for a teen is abstinence. The mistake of being sexually active can lead to the huge mistake of premature pregnancy. This consequence impacts not only the teenager, but also the family. Everyone who is involved has their future altered. The risks are just too great. Dealing with teen sex is nerve-wracking. It's not easy being the parent of an adolescent. For parents, there is no such thing as continued smooth sailing on the sea of adolescence. Prepare yourself to experience storms of worry and frustration at times. Expect that even when you have done your best, sometimes the results won't be what you wished for. Depend on what you have already taught your teenager. The values you have instilled in them and the healthy lessons that they have learned will not go unrewarded. Don't give up. Hang in there. Remember that you are the adult and they are still your child. Keep in mind that despite the turmoil, there will be moments of joy and pride in your teenager. Don't forget to reach for that balance between allowing them the freedom of more choices while still giving adequate boundaries and consequences. Do all of this in spite of the fact that your teenager will appeal to resent it and not acknowledge the fact that they really need you. The test of time will reveal the truth. Your love and concern will pay off. Conclusion. The phrase, "kids grow up so fast," has become an understatement. Children are exposed early to adult issues. Generations in the past didn't have to face these matters until they were more emotionally and psychologically equipped. Violence, sexuality, the threat of physical harm, kidnapping, molestation, and a world that no longer appears safe are all issues that our children have to face. They live in a new world, one that isn't always pretty. This truth is unfortunate and not easily changed. However, we can help by supporting our children and preparing them for the future. Combine a child's exposure to all of these threats with the reality of children developing physically earlier, and parents face an even greater challenge. Adolescence no longer begins at age 13, but at ages 11 or 12. Growth spurts and other physical changes usually don't wait until the teenage years any longer. The possibility of pregnancy doesn't wait either. Most young ladies are starting menstruation earlier. It is not unusual for a girl at the age of 11 to start having periods. Hormonal changes can begin long before what we used to consider being the time of puberty. Some people have attributed these premature physical changes to our diets. Growth hormones ooze from the meats that we consume. Other chemicals infest the foods on our table as well. Our diets affect the rate at which our children mature. Puberty is affected and triggered earlier. Therefore, not only are our children exposed to things that they shouldn't be exposed to, but they also begin to change physically, without the benefit of the additional 1 or 2 years to prepare that past generations have had. Today's parents must be wiser and more watchful. Parenting today is an even greater undertaking than in the past. Uncommon sense is the need of the day. Adolescents are threatened by the world, their friends, and themselves. In order to further help this challenge, the 12 do's and don'ts of parenting teens is offered in the next chapter.